Well, we all know emotional intelligence is really important in the workplace, and I think that's one of the key strengths that I bring with me. And I very much care about the individuals, because if they are working at their best, if they're empowered and feel valued, then they will bring to the table, just next level attitude and skills, and they'll help you succeed, because realistically you can be a GM or a manager or a supervisor or a superintendent, but you're only ever as strong as the weakest person in your team. So it's to your benefit to really help bring people along on the journey.
That's such a good insight and overview of, how to look at managing people. Welcome back to the Mining Mum podcast. I'm Tegan, your host, and today I have a very inspiring guest, Petrina. Petrina is the General Manager of RivTow Marine. RivTow Marine operates all the tugs in Port Hedland for one of the biggest mining companies in Australia. For those that don't know, Port Hedland is also the biggest export port in the whole world, so it's a pretty massive job. Petrina, how did you get into that role?
So probably a year ago there was a job advertised, and I thought I'll just throw my hat in the ring. And so wrote an application and submitted that through. And then I didn't hear anything for a little while, and out of the blue I received a phone call from the CEO, and we just started having this really organic conversation, and then he invited me to a more formal interview, and from there I think we just hit it off and felt that there would be a really strong working relationship, and ultimately I then was offered the position. So I feel really quite privileged.
Oh, that's amazing. As I mentioned, the largest export port in Australia, massive job. How did you get into marine originally?
So about 6-7 years ago, I applied for a job with North Queensland Bulk Ports, which is on the east coast, based out of Mackay and Brisbane. The ports included Mackay, Hay Point, Abbott Point and Weipa. And I was lucky enough to secure what I thought was an amazing job. I recall reading the ad in the paper or on Seek, I shouldn't say paper, on Seek. And I thought, wow, this is me. It was all around cultural change, leadership, safety, making a difference and taking the organisation on a journey. And so I said to my husband, as I was punching out a very quick application, because it closed in about an hour's time, I said, we're moving to Mackay. And he went, okay. So it was literally the next day I got a phone call after submitting that application, and then went through that process. And about a month later we moved to Mackay, and I took up that job. So it was great and I loved it. Yeah.
So interesting. And prior to applying for those roles, what were you doing before that?
So if we go back many, many moons, my original first career was that of an early childhood teacher, and actually owned and operated a long day care centre, so a 50-place centre on the south coast of New South Wales, and decided that that was my passion, and it was at the time. I had a young family and a FIFO husband. So, jumped in, as I always do, head first, and thought I'll work it out while I'm on my way. So that's where I first started, and then moved on into adult education. So going and working for TAFE Queensland, and then also decided that I needed to think about a career when my children had grown up and were leaving home. And having a lifelong FIFO husband, I wanted to be able to be skilled so I could travel and live and work with him, that I'd be able to pick up work easily. So the journey of study continued. And I think I told you the other day it was 16 years now of completed studies to make sure I'm quantifying my skills as I drive through my career. And so I then thought, well, safety and the legal side of things really kind of interested me. So I started studying health and safety as another university degree. And I just happened to have a job at the TAFE where I was working at the time. So I was looking after East Coast, and they wanted a safety manager, so I jumped in, and I think my skills really started to kind of emerge, and I wasn't trying to look after little kids, and I'd sold my business at this stage, and I took on site services, facilities, infrastructure, and it just kept growing, and then went to a corporate role in Brisbane. So that was a really rapid sort of climb through some of the ranks, if you want to put it that way. And that was where I was at just before we ended up moving to Mackay, because I felt at that time, well, I'd done everything now.
Yeah.
And Richard's career, his projects focus around marine infrastructure as well. So I thought, ports, it's the next logical move.
Yeah.
So did that for a long time. And in between being at North Queensland Bulk Ports and coming over to Western Australia, I actually took on a role, again, in the mining industry. It was Central Queensland Manager for Kinetic Specialised Resources, which was the busing, transportation and logistics for all of the mines in Central Queensland, so the Bowen Basin. And that gave me some more insight into all of those, different genres that, all lead into that supply chain. And then I just decided I was missing out on my kids, because 2 out of 3 were on the West Coast and their careers were really taking off. And I said to my husband, you can fly anywhere. I think I'm going to get a job in Port Hedland.
Oh.
And I was really lucky to secure a role with Pilbara Ports. And I was there for about 10 months. And then the opportunity of the lifetime, as the general manager role I have now came up. And I went, yeah, I'm going to take that. And I work with an amazing team.
So good. So 16 years study, you mentioned you did health and safety degree. What were the other things that you studied?
So I have studied business administration, project management. I've gone on to do my Australian Institute of Company Directors, so I'm a graduate of that organisation as well. I am a chartered OHS professional practitioner through the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, so I have to maintain all of those skills. So a lot of the time I spend reading and researching and I have to keep up CPD points, so your professional practice points, in order to maintain those status. So that keeps me really quite busy. My kids always laugh because for a long time I just didn't watch TV. I didn't have any time.
Yeah.
But I think it was really good for them because they saw how hard I worked and they really valued that and appreciated the work and effort that I'd put into it and how it's provided me with a really exciting career.
Yeah.
So, and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
So good. And what other skills do you think were transferable from running your own business and working in childcare and, teaching to then going into another career in the marine industry?
So you really have to refine your people skills when you work with children and families. They have to be really on point. And I think it provides a lot of insight. One of the things that I learned as an educator was behaviour happens for a reason. And so that's, I think, empowered me to be able to look at situations and rather than react, I can digest and pull apart and go, now, why is that happening? Something must be in play that's making that happen. And I think that's a really good skill because sometimes, well, we all know emotional intelligence is really important in the workplace. And I think that's one of the key strengths that I bring with me. And I very much care about the individuals because if they are working at their best, if they're empowered and feel valued, then they will bring to the table, just next level attitude and skills, and they'll help you succeed because realistically you can be a GM or a manager or a supervisor or a superintendent, but you're only ever as strong as the weakest person in your team. So it's to your benefit to really help bring people along on the journey.
That's such a good insight and overview of how to look at managing people. Let's talk about your role now. So what does a day in the life as a GM for RivTow Marine look like?
So probably the best part of my day is when I get the opportunity to stop for 5 minutes and look out the window and actually watch the tugs on the water doing their movements. I liken it to, it's almost like ballet, because they just sit so beautifully on the water and they're such powerful vessels. And these guys are incredibly skilled. And I say guys because there's less than 2% females in the entire maritime crew that we have. And they are incredibly skilled, talented. You watch them and it's it's precision that happens. And I mean, you've probably seen when they have the community days where they put on the displays and that.
Yeah.
It's just awe-inspiring. So that's a really positive thing. But the fact that I actually have the opportunity to work in such a highly regarded industry is also pretty cool.
Yeah.
Starting work normally 6:30 in the morning, those quiet few hours help me just power through some of the work that needs to happen. There's everything from looking at our operations team and what they'll need to achieve for the day, scheduling and tugs, what have we got out of commissions, understanding what are the critical things that could happen here today, to the health and safety team. I've got two of the most amazing girls who work in that space, and the work that they do in terms of supporting crews with investigations or, just general support and advice. And then we've got our technical team, which that is amazing. I've just come back from Singapore after having the opportunity to actually look at one of our vessels undergoing a 10-year special survey dry docking. And that was like, wow, these things are insane, So, and all of the things that need to happen in that space around maintenance and, planning, it really has demonstrated to me how you need to really understand and have the right people in the right positions in a business, because you can't be the expert in every field. And I'm really, pardon the pun, there to steer the ship.
Yeah.
So, and I liaise with our client who we have the head contract with, and I liaise with our parent company. So RivTow Marine is owned by Riverside, and I work closely with headquarters that's based in Brisbane, for the day-to-day ongoing issues that come up and work that needs to happen. So writing reports, talking to people, talking with the crews, getting out on the vessels, no day is the same.
Yeah.
It's really awesome. I love it. Yeah.
So busy.
It is very busy.
Busy lady. And so on the tugboats, I know that's a lot of people's dream jobs, working on the water every day. What are the entry-level roles, or how do you get into being a tug driver?
Talking with some of the guys who are now masters, some of them have come from going through AMC, which is the Australian Maritime College, and have done their qualifications that way and come in as a mate, and to be trained up at entry level. Then there's a very strict training regime that we go through. It takes them 2 years to actually be deemed competent to be in charge of particular vessel types. So there's different classes. We've got different size tugs, and if you ask me to quote them now, I'd probably get them all wrong. Or some of them come from fishing, so they've actually been on coastal charter boats and things like that. We have some people that have been at sea on large vessels and have started as mates and deckhands in that way. So there is lots of different ways that you can get into the industry, but it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time, a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
So we have a Mates to Masters program that they go through, and like I said, that takes 2 years because they have to be deemed competent before they can actually be in charge of the vessel. So that's why I'm inspired by these guys.
Yeah.
They're just amazing.
Yeah. And it's a very highly sought after role. Mainly good pay packet, I've heard. Google it. But what other benefits do the tug drivers get in terms of like rosters?
So they're all slightly different, but most of them work a 3 and 3. And within that 3 and 3, we have different start and finish times. So we have a crew or a vessel that will start at 3 a.m. till 3 p.m. and then they have 3 p.m. till 3 a.m. And so we have 3, 4, 5, 6. So they stagger that to make sure that we constantly have vessels available to perform the movements within the port at any given time. Because as you can appreciate, if they will stop and start at the same time, that doesn't really suit for the ships just to wait to come in. They can't wait.
Yeah.
So the 3 and 3, some of them in between the different groups that work together, they might have different 5 and 2 or whatever might be working in terms of their own arrangements. But generally speaking, it's 3 and 3.
That's crazy. 3 weeks on.
I know.
And is it days and nights, or do they?
They swap days and nights. Yep,
Yeah.
days and nights. So shipping never stops.
Yeah,
so our crews
definitely.
don't. Yeah.
And in terms of the operations, they're taking the bulk
Bulk carriers.
the bulk carriers out.
Yep.
How many tugs do they need per boat?
So it depends on the size of the vessel. They have outbound and inbound as well, because, they come in empty or they come in full with fuel and they bunker out, or they go out with all the iron ore. It depends on what is being moved and the size of the vessel, but generally speaking, 3 tugs for each of them. So as I may or may not know, the biggest risk to our operations is channel blockage. So there is a lot of collaboration between the Port Authority, the pilots, VTS, clients, us, to make sure that, everything is absolutely understood about the task at hand, precisions, the movements, the speeds, the location of where it will be. So it's quite amazing the amount of work that goes into just one vessel movement. Over the average month the crews perform approximately 1,400 movements and around about, I think it was 450 vessels.
Wow.
That's just 1 month. Yeah. So it's a bit nuts.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
That is very cool.
Very
That's
cool.
insane. And you're a grandmother?
I'm a grandmother now. So when we talk about the mining mum, I'm the mining nan.
Yeah, the mining nan's so cool. Being a general manager of a massive company and then juggling family life, how do you balance everything?
I think I'm just pleased that I'm in the position where I actually get to see them every day. So before, like I said, I was living over on the East Coast, and I lost my mum about 2 years ago. And 6 months after that, I just woke up and said, what am I doing here in Mackay? My kids' careers were really taking off. Emily and Luke were over here working, living and working. COVID had really impacted us because we had really not a lot of opportunities to actually come and visit. And Emily was already pregnant. She'd had Jet. And I just went, I can work anywhere, I'm passionate enough to find a job and have that balance. So some days I'm exhausted, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And as a general manager, I drive around in a really lovely car and I have a car seat in the back so that I can go and pick up Jet anytime I need to. So, and then when I did come over, I went and saw my youngest daughter, who was living about 4 hours from me in Rockhampton in Queensland. And I said to her, I'm thinking about moving over west. And she said, great. We don't like Rockhampton. We'll come too.
Oh, that's so good.
So they're now living in Perth and we're all over on the West Coast. So we do have some of my parents left over on the East Coast, and Richard's mum is still down in New South Wales, and they'll come over for a visit. But it's wonderful for us because we get to see and build a relationship with our grandkids as opposed to just being on FaceTime all the time.
Yeah,
so it's been absolutely worth it. And I feel like all of these opportunities just present if you open yourself up to them.
Yeah.
So, I feel really, really lucky. Really lucky.
That's so good. And you've obviously inspired your daughter to get into the marine space as well.
Yes. So both of my children always said as they were growing up, we would never do what Dad does or what you do. And now they're both in the same industry, and our son is actually doing exactly what his father did. It's really interesting. But yes, Em works in that industry as well, and she looks after towage across the river. But she's on maternity leave, as you know, which is really nice. So it's great for the family because all of those years of, Dad working away and now they're experiencing what it was like, and I think their bond and connection is such a strong one now too. They've got a great appreciation for what he did.
Yeah. And you mentioned your husband is still doing FIFO, so that must be a bit of a juggle.
It's always been a juggle. It's been more than 30 years that he's been doing that now.
Wow.
But I joke regularly because I think he's the only person that flies into Port Hedland to have his R&R. So, because he's doing a project up out of Darwin at the moment.
Yeah.
But he's been really supportive of my opportunities now, knowing that I'll say we both sacrificed when the children were younger because he worked away and missed out on a lot of things when we would have family occasions. And mind you, I then had to work and do all of that and run businesses and raise kids and do all the day-to-day without him being there. And we had a very good friend network, but we didn't live near family. So, this is just wonderful now. When Richard comes home for his week off, he enjoys going over and spending time with Jet and Emily and now little baby Cade. So all going down to Perth and seeing the other two boys. So it's really, really lovely. We're very lucky.
Oh, that's so good. And before we wrap up today, what would be your advice to anybody that's wanting to progress in their career, similar to you, work through a leadership journey? What would be your advice?
I think it's really important to believe in yourself. That's the first and foremost thing. The other thing is always take every opportunity you can to quantify your skills and knowledge, whether it's a short course or a diploma or a Cert 4. Extend yourself, and challenge yourself and be open to feedback. It's really important that you seek out a mentor. Having some really wonderful mentors can be the difference between being hugely successful and sort of just putting along, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to have some amazing mentors in my career, and I've really leveraged that very strongly because you can think you can do a really good job, but there's always some way that you could reflect on and maybe have done it a different way to achieve a different outcome, or, just to try and improve yourself continuously.
Yeah.
I think if I ever got to the point where I felt like I knew everything, I think it would be time to retire because that's not a healthy mindset.
Yeah.
So, and believe in yourself, just do it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been very inspiring. I feel like I need to go and do some more study or something.
It's all right. Thanks, Tegan.
But yes, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
If you liked this episode, please like and share with a friend. Thank you.